All right, lesson 9.6. This is some awesome, awesome math. Here we go. In the last lesson, we worked on completing the square, which you can do when you have something like ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So far, so good. If we're going to complete the square on this exact equation, there are a number of things we need to do first. You might recall that we need to move the c to the other side. You may recall that we need to get rid of this a coefficient. So we have x squared plus a equal. You may recall that we need to take our b term, which is now b over a, and do like this. And if we add it to one side, we need to add it to the other. Once we've got this much done, this side is ready to be factored as a perfect square trinomial. So this simplifies to x plus and I'm going to simplify this, which becomes b squared over 4a squared. All right, let's see if we can simplify the right side of this a little bit. We've just got two fractions here, which we could add together if they had a common denominator, and we could make it a common denominator if we multiplied this one by 4a over 4a. So let's do that. We end up with negative 4ac over 4a squared plus b squared over 4a squared, which then we put into one fraction, negative 4ac plus b squared over 4a squared. All right, let's bring this back down. X plus b over 2a squared. Whew, this is looking complicated. Now, if we're going to try and solve this for x, we better take square roots of both of these sides. This side is easy. Square root of this side is just x plus b over 2a. Well, now I'm going to take the square root of this side. Remember, square roots are plus or minus. Is this beautiful or what? Now, you're going to learn in the next lesson. Here, let me show you differently. So technically, I guess you're not going to learn it in the next lesson. You're going to learn it right now. This was part of that equation. The square root of this whole fraction is the same thing as the square root of this over the square root of that. We can't do a whole lot with this numerator, but this denominator, those are both perfect squares. We can take that square root. So we end up with plus or minus the square root of negative 4ac plus b squared over 2a. Coming to the end. Almost done. Now, let's finish solving for x, which is easier than you'd think at this point, because all we have to do to get x by itself, move this. X equals negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of negative 4ac plus b squared over 2a. Oh, hey, look! Common denominators. Let's simplify it a little more. X equals negative b plus or minus negative 4ac plus b squared, the whole thing over 2a. So your very last step is just to put this in standard order, which means it's going to be x equals the opposite of b plus or minus, we're going to put the b squared term first, b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And that is the whole thing. What is that whole thing, you may ask? Why, it is the quadratic formula. And you need to memorize that whole monster. So here's a quadratic equation, x squared minus 4x equals 21. How are we going to use the quadratic formula? Well, first you have to figure out what this is in standard form, which is simply x squared minus 4x minus 21 equals 0. Now that you've got it this way, it's very easy to tell. A is equal to 1, b is equal to negative 4, and c is equal to negative 21. With all those numbers, you can plug this right in to your quadratic equation. So you're going to have to write that whole monster down, because you need it to refer to, and write it down, in its unfilled in form, so you have it as a reference, which means, yes, I expect to see on your paper, x equals, drum roll please, the opposite of b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac, the whole thing over 2a. My pen is starting to wear out. It's a good thing we're starting to run out of math book. Okay, so you know what a, b, and c are. You've got your formula written down. Well, plug in these values where they belong down here. This is going to equal the opposite of negative 4, because b is negative 4, plus or minus negative 4 squared minus 4. Zoom in a little bit better so you can see this. Minus 4 times 1 times negative 21. Over 2 times 1. Let's simplify. 4 plus or minus the square root of 16. And what on earth is 4 times 21? Hang on. 16 plus 84 over 2. Whew. Okay, let's carry on. Equals 4 plus or minus the square root of, what is 16 plus 84? Oh, I think they did this just to be nice to us, if you can believe it. Because, of course, 16 plus 84 adds up to 100 over 2. Thank goodness, this is a perfect square. That makes this a much nicer example. 4 plus or minus 10 over 2. So we've got two answers at this point. And that means we have 14 over 2 or negative 6 over 2, which gives us 7 or negative 3. That was a lot of work. All right, I'm not going to quite finish 9-6 because I want you to just get some practice using this quadratic formula. It's not very hard, but there are a lot of parts to it, so we're just going to practice. So next, I want you to go to page 571 and do number 7 through number 12 all. See how that goes.